Hello, y'all. It's Saturday, April 17th, and I was just making my coffee and sitting down to some breakfast and listening to Sam Mitchell. He has a YouTube channel called Collapse Chronicles. Uh, Highly recommend it. It's sometimes him commenting on things. Often as not, though, it's doing a roundup summary of the news as regards to how civilization or the environment, generally the latter, is collapsing in this kind of inevitable fashion. And I appreciate his work. He's definitely a journalist in that capacity, and uh, tries to bring clarity. And by clarity, I don't mean, well, I'm going to talk about what clarity is. Okay, that's really the point of this video. So, but clarity on the subjects of environmental collapse, extinction level events affecting animals and plants and the Earth system. So, and occasionally veering into climate change and things that can impact that. So, I got kind of a pet peeve that I want to get off my chest here real quick, which is clarity. I want to clear that up. I want to clear up what clarity means. So it's really easy, and this happens for people who don't have a background in the sciences. It's real easy to fixate on numbers. Because numbers are kind of a universal language. Let's just put it that way, right? So we can talk about the economy grew by 3%, okay? And that's like, well, 3%. There'll be a lot of people in your neighborhood who don't feel like the economy grew for them by 3%, but they didn't participate. Maybe their personal economy went down, right? So you can kind of get lost in numbers if you don't say, well, what part of the economy grew by 3%? Well, I mean, if it was mostly the stock markets or mostly a few small numbers of billionaires getting rich by a lot, then maybe just the whole economy only grew by 3%. But some people enjoyed most of that growth, and most people enjoyed none of that growth, right? So it's not very nuanced to just say, oh, the economy grew by 3%. We all should understand that there's got to be more to it than that. When you see your neighbors losing jobs and their mortgage is, they lose their house because they can't pay their mortgage, and when you're seeing that around you and you hear that the economy grew by 3%, you really should just kind of scratch your head and think, maybe there's more to this than just a number, right? So Sam, in his reporting as a journalist, thank you for the service, mentioned something I didn't know, but I knew, because I'm a biologist. I'm not a journalist, I'm a biologist. And he was reporting, Reuters or somebody, some group who was reporting through the media that a recent estimate study suggests that maybe there's as little as 3% of the planet's natural systems, or systems in general, that remain untouched by human patterns of behavior. Now, I've been watching Sam's Collapse Chronicles videos for a long time, and I occasionally jump into the comments and I will say things like, you're talking about biology today, so as a biologist, I'm going to weigh in here in the comment section. I'm going to clarify some things. And one of the clarifications I often make is that when the topic comes up of how much of the planet has been impacted by humans or is left to be impacted by humans, or how much remains, or how much can be preserved, or how much has been preserved, or that a new nature preserve has been created somewhere in Indonesia, or the Brazilian Amazon or something like that. And I quickly weigh in on claims such as that coming out of the media, and my usual comment is, to put it bluntly, there is nothing. There's nothing has been preserved. There is nothing that is not impacted by human behavior. Nothing. The actual number is zero. We did not set aside millions of acres in the Amazon to be protected. We set aside 0 acres in the Amazon to be protected. And I know there was a treaty signed, and all the dignitaries and everyone did high fives, and they signed this thing that said we're going to preserve 1 million acres in the Amazon. And that's not true. That didn't happen. They say it happened. They signed it. Money changed hands. Everyone, they cut the ribbon with the great big scissors, and all this kind of stuff. And it didn't happen. I mean, the thing they're claiming happened, did not happen. And that's because it cannot happen. There is no place on this planet that is unaffected by human activity. The number of acres unaffected by human activity is numerically 0. 0. Now you can say, okay, right, fine. I mean, sure. When we release things into the atmosphere goes everywhere, and everywhere is everywhere. And so somewhere, if you burn coal in China, I'm not picking on the Chinese, if you burn coal in Germany, okay, it doesn't matter. And the soot particles go up in the atmosphere, then they go around the atmosphere and they fall. And somewhere deep in the Amazon, there's a little soot particle from Germany that fell on a single leaf in the Amazon, and it sits there on that leaf, a little soot particle from Germany. So technically, yes, you're right. There's no place on the planet that hasn't been affected by humans. Technically, if you want to be pedantic about it. Well, no, it's worse than that. It's worse than one soot particle from a coal-fired power plant in Germany made its way around the world and found a leaf to land on. It's much worse than that. There are no systems left, and I want to make a distinction here. Words matter with me, and I just used a word. System. There are no natural systems left on Earth intact and unaffected by human activity. There might be one leaf somewhere that's unaffected by human activity. There might be one animal crawling around in the understory that is actually on some level in its internal biology unaffected by human activity. Maybe one, maybe a few scattered. But there are no systems. There are no ecological systems that are unaffected by human activity. Now, systems are big things. A system of living things can cover an entire island, an entire continent, or certainly part of a continent. We have estuarine systems. We have aquatic systems, rivers and lakes, streams. We have coastal systems. We have the boreal forest ecosystem. We have, even the tundra and the Arctic ecosystems. There are tens of thousands. Well, there are scores of identifiable types of systems, and many of those are represented by thousands of instances of these things. If you want to talk about deciduous forest ecosystems, there are probably 1,000 of those you could identify regionally. Small forests, big forests, or breaking down the big ones into smaller ones that are unique and distinct. There's probably 1,000 of them on the planet. Not one, not a single one is unaffected by human activity. Some of them are virtually annihilated. I would even say at this point, most of them are almost completely annihilated. And the recent study that says that 3% of the Earth's systems remain intact. That's not good news. My estimate is 0, and they came up with 3. Okay, well, you may say there's a huge difference between 0 and 3, and this is where we have to understand how numbers work in the natural world. Numbers do not work the way you think they do in the natural world. It may be technically correct that if you have that you started the day with $1, and today, at the end of the day, you have 3 cents of that dollars left, and then technically you're not broke, okay? And so you can say, yes, technically I still have some money. I got 3 pennies. Technically, the answer is yes, you still have money. But in natural systems, if all you have is 3% of something, or 3 individuals of some population, that you still have something, it's not true. It's just not true. Let me take the obvious example. Let's say the black rhinos are nearly extinct. We have 3 left, and you're like, great, we have 3 left. We can rebuild that population. All 3 are male. Well, so what? It's still 3. Biologically, that's 0. Biologically, you have 0 black rhinos left. They are functionally extinct. And it's not even as bad as that. You could have 30 individuals left. And if you're lucky and 15 are female and 15 are male, you still have essentially 0. I understand that still you have males and females, you could still maybe somehow pull this off. But as a biologist, I'm here to tell you, and any veterinarian would tell you, that when your population gets down to 30 individuals, half male, half female, they're gone. They are. If you don't do something right now, throw all the money you can at it, an entire team of veterinarians and wildlife biologists. If you don't do something now, they're gone. When you get down to 30, when you get down to 50, when you get down to 100, if you don't act right now, they're gone tomorrow. Numbers matter a lot with biological systems. Another example, making this up somewhat, but let's say you have 10,000 acres, no, it's more than that, 10 million acres of oak woodland in California. I grew up in the oak woodlands. They're all oak trees all around here. It's a very specific woodland. The oaks are scattered, so it's not a dense forest. They're scattered. It's a drought-tolerant species. Generally, these assemblages are somewhat drought-tolerant. The trees don't get real big, and the reproductive success in any given year of an oak woodland is pretty low. The trees can put out lots of acorns, but conditions have to be just right for those acorns to sprout and develop into young trees, which we call recruitment. Okay. When I was in college learning biology, and I was in botany classes a lot, one of the problems that we were looking at and actually studied in the field as young biologists, we got our feet wet, as they say, was an observation that the oak woodland was not recruiting. It was an observation. It wasn't a prediction. It wasn't a model. It was an observation. People were botanists, people who know what life looks like and can recognize the key aspects of life, growth, reproduction, death, decay, the cycling of all these things. Biologists, botanists will go out into the oak woodlands in California, and what they noticed was there was no recruitment. 10 million acres of oak woodlands in California. Maybe it's not 10 million. Whatever it is, no recruitment. No babies. And you say, no baby oaks. I see a big oak tree here and over there, another 50 feet, 100 feet over there. There's another one. And there's some younger oak trees here. There's some like 20-year-old or 15-year-old oak trees around here. And they're doing fine. The bark looks good. They've got new leaves. In fact, we see evidence of acorns all over the ground. So they're doing well enough to create acorns and try to reproduce, but we don't see any recruitment. There's no babies. And that's not good. So when I was in school, botanists were studying this. I don't know what the findings were, but because I didn't write those papers or participate in those papers if the papers ever came. But I can tell you what it means. And we hypothesized about this a little bit as students, working on our critical thinking skills. Why would there be no recruitment? Well, maybe there's been too long of a string of droughts and the little trees can't get started. Okay, that's one theory. Maybe we're running too much cattle and horses on these hillsides. You know, there's grass, there's oats there, and they run the cattle and the horses. And you know, you have a little baby oak tree and it's kind of covered, surrounded by grass, and some cow comes along and is just eating the grass and just eats that baby off, just bites it off, right? Eats it up with the rest of it. And just the animals traipsing back and forth as they do every day, you know, just disturbs the soil and knocks the plants over, crushes the acorns with their hooves, and eventually there's no recruitment. And then there's the oats themselves. The oats are not supposed to be there. This is not, you know, we don't have a native oat variety here in the northern hemisphere. Oats came from Eurasia, and they were introduced for whatever reason, on accident, on purpose, whatever. But now they grow in profusion in these areas, and it changes the habitat. It's no longer a bunch grass habitat where there's openings where things can get started. Now it's these oats, and they grow, you know, way high, and they're really thick stands of oats. And of course, it's great for the grazing for the animals that we like, but it's not necessarily going to work for the oak trees. So you can have 10 million acres of oaks and all these mature oak trees that are doing really well, and they're dropping tons of acorns every year. But if your recruitment is zero or close to it, then you don't have an oak woodland. You just don't. I mean, you have trees, and you can point to that tree and say, oh, look, there's an oak tree. There's one right next to it. But really, technically, biologically, as a system, it's gone. It's gone. Now, I'm overstating it because I'm trying to make a point here. The oak woodland in California is not in any great danger of extinction right now. I'm sure there are places where recruitment is fine. And there are probably some years where recruitment, or maybe I should say some decades, where recruitment works better for the oaks than it does maybe when we were looking at it when I was a student. But it kind of doesn't matter. These systems are impacted. The notion that we have an oak woodland, in air quotes, okay? We have an oak woodland and it's an ecosystem and it's there, it's been there for millions of years or whatever, is just wrong. It's just wrong. I can't even tell you what percentage of the oak woodland in California is viable. The actual number might be zero. The actual number of acres of oak woodland that are viable in the coming century could be zero. That's not even theoretical. That's an actual possible outcome. You know, when I was in school, that was the number. The number of recruited young oak trees was zero. These numbers don't work the way you think they do. If you've got 3% of something left, you might have zero. Another example, ecosystems habitat can become fragmented. So we're seeing this right here in the city where I live. They're kind of scrambling around trying to preserve. Okay, I use the words they use, but they don't mean to me what they mean to them. Okay, so I'm putting quotes around these things because the words have meaning to me, and they have meaning in the context that I work as a biologist. These people, when they venture into biology and they say we're going to preserve this habitat, this woodland, you know, we're going to buy it from the developer and we're going to preserve it, and you know, if I was in those meetings, I say you're not going to accomplish much, and you really shouldn't use that word. You know, you might even use the word, for example, in the context, we're going to preserve something in formaldehyde. We're going to preserve this, or we're going to hire a taxidermist and preserve the last elephant using taxidermy. We're going to preserve these specimens in museums. Okay, you're using the word differently than I use it. All right, you're not really preserving it. You're not saving it for posterity. You're not keeping it viable as an animal or as a plant or as a habitat. It's not preserved, okay? Yes, you preserved it in alcohol in a jar. That's not the same thing, okay? They're using words in a way that I would not use them. And I would rather they not use them. So they bought a bunch of land and they preserved it. They preserved open space for future generations. Well, some of it was already agriculture. So whatever was there when the Native Americans were here, whatever, some lowland, marsh with tule elk and the whole thing, that's all gone already. So you're preserving it. What? Oh, well, they're preserving ag land from being developed as subdivisions. Oh, I get it. Okay, fine. But once it's ag land, I don't care anymore. Neither does the rest of the planet. And the ecosystems that used to be in this area, they don't care anymore. Actually, you could bulldoze the orchard. I wouldn't care. I mean, okay, fine. It's food. So let's not bulldoze the food. That seems kind of self-defeating. But by the time it's agriculture, I don't care if you preserve it or not. I mean, I guess eventually we'll be preserving our suburbs against, urbanizing them. Our quaint suburbs with our single family homes, and we're going to preserve these. And it's like, why? No, that is not the challenge. Another problem is you're preserving a tiny piece of something that used to be enormous. And you're not preserving anything. The system is gone. You've got just a little tiny scrap of it left. And now you're going to rush out there with your money and rush out there with your biologists. You're going to put up caution tape and you're going to drive stakes in the ground and say, do not walk here and do not step on this endangered plant and do not molest this endangered squirrel. And, you're going to preserve it. No, you're not. It's gone. And by the time you start preserving an acre here and 10 acres there, and these reservations are 20 miles apart, they don't exist anymore as a system. There's a thing called an island effect that you can say, oh, we have 10,000 acres of some critical habitat in preservation, but if you've only got 10 acres here and 2 acres there and 5 acres there, and that's how you got you up to 1,000, then you don't have anything. These plants and animals can be eradicated in just a bad year. A bad year. It's like getting down to the last 30 black rhinos or something. And you say, oh, we have 30. Yeah, but they can be eradicated in 1 year if they get anthrax or something. The entire herd can be gone. Or you're down to 3 males or something like that, right? You could go from 30 and you're thinking you're doing pretty good to 3 and you've lost the battle. You can go from 30 to 3 and you've lost the battle because it was already so small. And so when you have all these islands of habitat that you're saying, oh, we're going to preserve some things now. It's time to start preserving. We've destroyed enough stuff that we're now going to get serious about preserving the last of it that's remaining. But if you end up with a bunch of islands scattered around, then, this island can disappear and no one even knows it. Oh, hell, it's worse than that. You can have 10 acres of habitat and you think you've done something, you spent a lot of money on it, whatever, and you come back 5 years later and it's all dead. It's all dead. And it's like, well, what happened? Well, there was an oil spill. Oh, you kidding me? Oh, yeah, there was a big fire came through. You burned everything, killed everyone. Oh, what? Oh, yeah, there was some farmer and he decided he wanted to plow this. And he just went through with his plow and he just plowed it. Are you kidding me? This was preserved. This was supposed to be set aside. Oh, yeah, well, we didn't know that. We just thought it was unused land. So I just came through here and ran my tractor through here and planted corn or whatever, ran my horses on it, my cattle, my sheep, and I didn't know it was preserved. I mean, I know there's a sign down there that says it's preserved, but I figured out the proper use of it was to run my herd on it. And they ate all the native plants, and now it's just star thistle and oats. Why did we bother? Why bother? No, serious. Ecosystem biologist here is asking, why bother? I'm asking you to explain to me why I should bother caring about this. There's 3% of the Earth's habitat is unimpacted by humans today? Really? Am I supposed to celebrate that? Because the actual number is not 3%, just so you know. The actual number is 0. And I don't consider that a victory at all. And I don't consider it a victory if now Bill Gates is going to hear that there's 3% that's left, and he's going to dedicate himself and all his money and all his entire personal fortune to preserving that exact 3%. We're like, Bill. Thanks a lot, pal. It would have been better though. I mean, do it if you want to. Okay, I'm not saying don't do it, but I'm just telling you that it's not going to make any difference. It's gone. It's just gone. And I know 3 sounds like more than 0, but it's not. I know that 3 male rhinos sounds like no rhinos, but it's not. It's not different. You got 3 male rhinos left. That's 3, right? No. No, it's not. It's 0. They're gone. They're done. You might as well eat them. I mean, seriously, go ahead, eat them. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter, not because I say so, and because I've lost my spirit, and I no longer have hope, and I should seek therapy. It doesn't matter, not because I've got a problem. It doesn't matter because it doesn't fucking matter. Okay? And this is where we get lost in the weeds. Someone publishes a paper and they say, oh, there's 3% left. Wow, 3%. Okay, well, back to the morning sports section, okay? The better title for the paper, although I know it would not be the paper that would be published in the mainstream media, including all of the juried, journals, the actual paper should have said, there is essentially no habitat left on Earth unaffected by humans. The proper title would have been essentially none. And then I would shut up. I say, yeah, you're right. I know there's a non-zero number out there floating around, but essentially the number is 0. And when someone wants to report, yes, we're down to the last, 30 black rhinos, what they should say in the second sentence is, and that's essentially none. And then the third sentence they could say, and the only difference between 30 and 0 is a $1 billion effort on the part of the entire human race to try and keep that number from going to 0, because 30 is 0. 30 is functionally 0. 30 is 1 step from 0. It's not 30 steps from 0. You don't go from 30 to 0 1 step at a time. You go from 30 to 0 in like 2 steps, okay? And one of the steps is you go from 30 rhinos to 3 males. And 3 males is 0. So that was like 1 step. You went from 30 to 3 and you're done. You're just done. They're gone. Because 3 males is none. And people don't understand that. It's like 3% economic growth is supposed to mean something to everybody. Well, it doesn't mean something to everybody. It meant something to the 1% richest people in the world. It meant nothing to the 99% who did not participate in that economic growth. A number means nothing in these contexts. And that's all you're going to get. You're going to get a number. And if you're an economist and you see 3% growth, well, you might actually know that 3% growth only happened in the 1% of the population and the nation so represented, right? But only an economist would know that. And when someone comes out and says, well, 3% of the Earth's habitat remains untouched by humans, well, that means it's nothing to the average person except 3% is a number. 3%, well, I guess that's better than 0. To a biologist, 3% means something. Just like to a veterinarian or a wildlife manager, 30 black rhinos remaining in the world means something to them different than it means to you. Because they have different knowledge than you have. And I have different knowledge about 3% of the world's habitat remains untouched by humans. I have the ability to render judgment on that number. And if we're down to 3%, then the number is 0. It is 0. It's probably been zero for a while, because it was probably zero at 20%. Whenever that happened, that may have happened 50 years ago. We may have been, when I was in school, we may have been at a point already where there's nothing left untouched. Nothing left untouched. And when I was in school, we were studying the foothill oak woodland, and one of the observations was that the number of young oaks being recruited in an average year, in an average decade, maybe an average century, is zero. Zero has been the number for a long time, people. Zero has been the number. Not 3%, not 20%, not 30, zero. And you need to understand that, because you're going to hear a lot about there's 10% of this and that grew by 7% and we have this much left, and they're not going to give you the context. They're not going to explain to you that actually 3% left is zero. They're not going to say that. That paper won't get published. Straight up fact, not a conspiracy. I'm not some wingnut. Any paper that says there's nothing left will not get published. Will not. Even when we're down to zero. I mean, none. There are no black rhinos left. Even when we're down to zero, not just 3 males, none. That actually won't be published. I would wonder if it even makes a headline. They'll tell you, the last animal of something died, but it's not like there's any analysis of that. It's just, 2 column inches on page 3 of the style section. The last of something died in a zoo somewhere in some place. Or we think there's none left in the wild. And we could never actually breed them in zoos. So they've never really existed in zoos, and we have a suspicion there's none left in the wild, but we don't really know. So it's not really zero, it's kind of a qualified zero. And maybe there's something out there, and maybe we just haven't found it, and we'll keep looking and we'll let you know, and then they never let you know. It's just a non-event. A non-event. It's no significance, there's no analysis, there's no one sits back and says, wow, this is a watershed moment. There's no. No, that's not going to happen for you. They're not going to do that for you. No one's going to do that for you. So I'm here to tell you, in general, globally, the number at this point is zero for everything. You just assume zero. Everything is declining, and it's already declined to a point where it cannot recover, and all it's going to take is one bad event. And you go from, well, there's not much left to, we're not sure there's anything left. Could be zero. Don't want to talk about that, though. We'll just be hopeful. We'll preserve something, and maybe, whatever. I'm here to tell you the truth. It's gone. The actual number is zero. Even if there's a non-zero number, the number is zero. Anyway. That's my rant. It's a downer. I don't care. It's the truth. This Titanic has hit that iceberg. Yeah, it's a bummer. Ruins the evening. Sorry. Deal with it.